Hello, happy Tuesday. It's read aloud time. We left off on chapter 8, and it's called The Big Break. We're going to read about more of the adventures and excitement that's happening in Mrs. Brisbane's class. And here we go. Excuse me. You'd think by now my job as a classroom hamster would have taught me what to expect in the classroom. But still, I was often caught off guard by humans and their behavior, especially that Friday. Friday is always the day of the week when I go home with one of my classmates for the weekend. I have fun, and I get to learn even more about my human friends. But instead of revealing who would take me home for the weekend, Mrs. Brisbane made a surprising announcement. Class, I'm going to be taking Humphrey and Og home for spring break. Joey is taking the tadpoles to his house for the week, she said. The week? I squeaked. Don't you mean the weekend? I'm not giving you any homework over spring break, she continued, but I want you to bring in more signs of spring. I think you'll find a lot of them. And when we get back, we'll make a plan for family fun night and start a great new project. I still like the tightrope idea, tell the truth, Thomas said. I might even try it over spring break. Some of my friends laughed, but not me. I can't figure out why they call it spring break, I squeaked. What's broken about spring? No one answered. My friends seemed extra excited for the bell to ring at the end of the day, but I was extra confused. Don't get me wrong, I love going home with Mrs. Brisbane and spending time with her and her husband, Bert. And it's nice that Og would get to come with me. I thought he needed a break from the tadpoles. But I wondered what my friends would do over spring break. Even more, I wondered what would happen with Joey's tadpoles. Would they grow legs and arms and heads? Up to now, I hadn't seen much progress. It didn't matter what I wondered, because at the end of the day, Mrs. Brisbane brought my cage out to her car. Mr. Morales carried out Og's tank. Sue, you are a wonder, he said. Caring for all these animals takes a lot of work, but the children get so much out of having them in the classroom. I guess it does take a lot of work to care for animals, but as a classroom pet, let me say that it takes a lot of work to care for humans, too. In the end, all the work pays off because I help my friends and they help me. I like Mrs. Brisbane's house. It's painted a cheery shade of yellow, almost the color of a golden hamster like me, and has white shutters. Inside, she always has fresh flowers on the table, even when it's not spring. Bert, our house guests are here, she announced as she carried my cage through the front door. Mr. Brisbane rolled his wheelchair to the door and she put my cage in his lap. Welcome back, Humphrey, he said. You're just what we need for spring break. Thanks, I squeaked. After he put my cage on the large table in the living room, Mrs. Brisbane said, Let's get Og out of the car. Mr. Brisbane rolled his chair outside, and when he came back, he had Og's tank on his lap. He and Mrs. Brisbane set it on the table next to me. They're used to being together all the time, she said. Mr. Brisbane nodded. It's hard to understand, but somehow this hamster and this frog are truly friends. He's a very wise man. But recently, I was having trouble connecting with my friend Og. Maybe a week at the Brisbane's house would help. What are your plans for the week? Bert asked his wife. Oh, I hope to sleep late every day, she said. Really? I couldn't imagine Mrs. Brisbane sleeping late. I'll have lunch with my friends and clean out a closet or two, she continued. But I also have to catch up on work. Mr. Brisbane took her hand. Do you have to, Sue? Mrs. Brisbane sighed. I really need to figure out what our class is doing for family fun night. The theme this year is the circus, and I don't have a clue. Mr. Brisbane thought for a moment. You could be clowns. We thought of that, Mrs. Brisbane said, but Morgan already signed her class up for that. Morgan is Miss Mack's first name. Morgan McNamara, my first teacher. Mr. Brisbane patted his wife's hand. We'll think of something, he said. I hope so, I squeaked. The Brisbanes both chuckled. If I could only understand him, Mrs. Brisbane said, I think I would learn a lot. I have to admit, I think she was right. While the Brisbanes ate dinner, I talked to Og. Do you know what? I asked. I just thought of something. He replied with a single boing. You know how a circus has all kinds of animal acts? As soon as I squeaked, animal acts, my whiskers began to wiggle. They're mostly large and fearsome creatures, like lions and tigers and elephants. Some of them jump through hoops. Not the elephants, of course. Boing, boing, Og twanged. He had a lot more to say now than he did when the specks were swimming nearby. And people do tricks on horseback, I added. Boing, Og replied. Humans love them, I said. And I know a couple of other animals that humans love to watch. After dinner, the Brisbanes came back to the living room. Anything on TV? Bert asked. Not really, Mrs. Brisbane replied. Let's talk about the circus. Mr. Brisbane leaned back and stared at the ceiling for a moment. I haven't been to the circus for years, he said. Not since Jason was a boy. Jason was the Brisbane's grown-up son who lived far, far, far away. I'd never thought about Mr. Brisbane taking his young son to the circus. I'd never thought about the Brisbanes being like the families of my classmates. He really loved the strong man who lifted, I can't remember, something like 2 or 3 times his own weight, Bert said. Eek, I squeaked. And there was the human cannonball, Mrs. Brisbane said. I saw that once when I was a girl. The man flew out of the cannon and landed in a net. Eek, I squeaked. Mr. Brisbane laughed. I don't think you'll be shooting your students out of a cannon or having them lift things twice their weights. The parents might get upset, Mrs. Brisbane said, giggling. I'd never heard her giggle in room 26. They were silent for a while, thinking about circus acts. I think that's a good place for us to stop. We'll continue with chapter 8 on Thursday. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you soon. Bye.